The Miracle at Palaven is a Mass Effect fanfic written by ysionris and narrated by Whiskey Golf. This work is rated teen and above and contains instances of swearing, tactical Krogan, unconventional Turian, glorious Boschtets, and a great deal of logistics. Listener discretion is advised. Dedication. For all the unsung heroes fighting battles with wrenches, prayer, and Medigel. Select excerpt from Of Steel and Talons, The Battle of Palaven by Arena Nysiricus, 2214 CE edition, edited for human reading. Licensed to Caden Alenko Secondary School, Kithoi Ward, Citadel. Chapter 12. Preparing for a Miracle. Operation Whiskey Corridor was, according to official press releases, a mitigated tactical setback, an operation that encountered significant obstacles before it was quickly scaled back in favor of other operations. In Captain Irina Ixius's opinion, Whiskey Corridor was a complete disaster. It had been a daring, ambitious plan that had been chosen in favor of two other cancelled operations: Phantom Snow, a highly coordinated and organized retreat from low-priority defensive positions on Manay, so the fleet could bombard the Reaper forces overrunning the area, and Stardust Sonata, a coordinated counterattack against skirmishing Reapers targeting the shipyards around Natus. Admiral Irix Coronati had been confident that if he could just open a direct path to the Trebia mass relay, it would streamline logistical considerations between Palaven space and all other Turian military resource holdings across Citadel space. But as well-equipped and well-trained as the Turian fleet was, it could not match the alacrity in which the Reapers coordinated with each other and responded to threats. An operation that required split-second timing amongst Turian starships to isolate and outflank individual Reapers between Palaven and the Trebia mass relay was doomed to fail when the Reapers could, and did, dance around Turian warships and regroup, despite the fact that the Turian starships generally outnumbered each Reaper vessel 5-1. The failures were not due to the shortcomings of the Turian fleet, each ship filled with well-trained, well-disciplined and experienced officers that represented the best Citadel space had to offer, of which Ixius' carrier the Example was no exception. The crew had manned the Example admirably, responding to their captain's commands faster than any other crew responsible for navigating a kilometer-long warship could, and Ixius had never seen such a superb performance from any carrier crew until Whiskey Corridor. Still, in spite of this, the Example had fared poorly in the operation. She had been outflanked by two Reapers, and only survived because the Dominion had posed a much more tempting target when the Dreadnought moved in to support the Example. Deck 2 had been breached and damaged so badly that its entirety was exposed to vacuum, and declared off-limits until their return to the docks of Natus could facilitate flash repairs. More than 3/4 of the carrier's fighter-bomber complement had been lost, all of their drones shot down. The Turians performed exceptionally, but they were only organic. Orders from Coronati went to Fleet CIC, which had then passed through military tactical networks to individual ship communications officers, then to their captains, then to the bridge crews. That was to say nothing of individual ship CICs reporting rapid-fire updates to the captain, which was hectic enough even with VI assistance. The Reapers, in contrast, had virtually no communications delay, controlled their weapons and navigations as if they were extensions of the body, and instantly responded to any situation simultaneously. Whiskey Corridor created a salient from Palaven towards the Trebia mass relay, a salient across nowhere that needed to be defended. What was meant to be coordinated isolate and destroy operations against the Reapers along the highway ended up as a disaster, as Reaper ships simply winked in and out of FTL faster than Turian vessels could follow, and flanked the corridor from every possible vector. 2 days into the operation, with nothing to show for its progress, aside from barely managing to secure no more than 30% of the planned corridor, Coronati finally called an end to the fiasco. 214 ships had been committed to the operation, but only 186 had made it safely out, and that wasn't even counting the ships that were heavily damaged. The only measurable success they had was that the Reapers no longer maintained a defensive perimeter around the Trebia mass relay. They had attempted to guard the mass relay religiously, to cut off reinforcements and logistical lines, but after taking losses from the continuous stream of self-guided warp bombs sent by out-system Turian forces through the relay, the Reapers had retreated to a minimum safe distance to intercept the bombs before they could do any more damage. The Navy was deprived of a way to take potshots from across mass relays. but at least the Reapers staying far away from the relay meant out-system reinforcements could arrive in the Trebia system without having to worry about being instantly shot down. The Example had been amongst the first ships to return to Nanus for repairs, giving the crew 2 days of rest, while shipyard engineers managed to make miraculous repairs to the extensive damage to the ship. It was the only piece of good news that Ixius could walk away with from Whiskey Corridor, aside from the fact that they were all still alive, as it meant they were not in the long queue of ships waiting for the docks to empty up. The engineers and dock workers in the shipyards orbiting Nanus worked on little sleep, because while crews sat downtime between shifts and during repairs, damaged vessels kept docking in for the repair and resupply crews. Their docks were always full, and with many more ships waiting in orbit for repairs and resupply, outpacing the rate of even the engineers' miracles. They were constantly being shot at by skirmishing Reapers, made worse by the fact that they were unarmed stationary targets, protected only by a defense of dreadnoughts and their escorts. Their food supplies rarely ever arrived on time, due to supply ships being ambushed or diverted by the enemy. They had been spending 19 hours out of every 20 in vacuum-sealed, hot, uncomfortable armor for weeks, due to constant attacks that depressurized parts of the shipyards, depressurizing only to eat or relieve themselves. They were woefully undermanned, because higher command gave greater priority for replacements to the warships, and the shipyards needed to have specialists that were not easily trained or replaceable. Yet when the engineers gave the promise that the Example would be combat-worthy again in 2 days, Ixius knew they'd keep it. But that was not enough to stop the chain of bad news that kept flowing in. Casualty reports were staggering. One of the downed hierarchy ships had been a dreadnought. Nanus was beginning to see a supply shortfall, as supply routes between Palaven, Monet, and Nanus were obstructed by Reaper forces. And, for the first time since the war started, Ixius was told she was on the waiting list for replacements for the crew she had lost. Previously, almost every ship that returned to dock after a sortie or operation had its casualties replaced by a line of waiting reservists almost immediately. That the Navy was told it'd have to wait, by high command no less, could only mean that the brass was losing faith in the Navy's attempts to reassert aerospace superiority over Palaven, or that there was a manpower shortfall. Or worse, both. It was in light of all of this that Ixius desperately hoped for good news, when the Example's executive officer Commander Patrus Castellus contacted her in the captain's quarters while she was resting. Unfortunately, her prayers were not answered. "Captain," her XO stated bluntly, "I have bad news, and I have even worse news." The bad news was confirmation that High Command had decided not to give the Navy priority on replacements. As far as the deliberative bodies were concerned, the Navy had made 3 costly attempts: the 15-minute plan, Operation Iron Hammer, and Operation Whiskey Corridor, with very little to show for it. It was unsurprising that High Command was now doubtful of the Navy's ability to maintain orbital superiority for much longer, even if the entire war effort went towards replacing the Navy's losses. There was also General Minin Resvirix's own lobbying to consider, his insistence that conventional warfare was useless against the Reapers, and that his own ground forces were necessary to hit the enemy where they least expected it. He might have been right, but that cost the Navy resources. What this effectively meant for Ixius, and every other captain and admiral in the fleet, however, was that their losses would not be replaced for some time, that resources would not be diverted to another ambitious naval operation, and the fleet would be doomed to limp around for days, making runs between Palaven, Monet, and Nanus. Far most frustrating, however, was the implication that the hierarchy was having manpower shortages, if they were as far as to mention that the Example wasn't getting immediate replacements. "Are reinforcements not making it?" Ixius asked, dreading the answer. Castellus' reply was so even, Ixius wasn't sure if he was feeling sarcastic or genuinely dismayed. "They are. That's the even worse news. They're Krogan."